In an announcement last year, Chinese President Xi Jinping said that his belt was better than anything you could buy from a Bonka's line in Dillard's. Well, Xi wasn't talking about his actual belt, but his One Belt, One Road policy, which, as explained by the Brookings Institution on March 7th of 2019, is the Chinese monetary policy to build a new 21st century Silk Road, which connects China, making them the biggest global economy. And as explained by the BBC on March 2nd of 2019, the 21st century Silk Road runs right through Latin America, where they tell us that China has become Latin America's largest creditor, investing over $1.2 trillion in the region since 2000. And they further estimate that with the advent of the One Belt, One Road policy, China and Chinese companies will invest an additional $5 trillion in the region by 2024. This massive economic shift necessitates us asking today's question: how will China's influence impact Latin America? It is clear that China will reshape Latin America's economy, creating new economic dependencies. We'll see this to be true for three main reasons. First, Latin America will become a new manufacturing center for China. Second, China will focus on natural resource extraction. And finally, China will make Latin America dependent on foreign investment. But first, Latin America will become a new manufacturing center for China. As China's economy continues to grow quickly, they need to figure out new ways to support the continuation of that economic growth. And as The Economist on March 2nd of 2019 explains, their One Belt, One Road policy does just that. They explain that China's GDP has grown historically from about 5 to 30% per year since 1980. However, this rapid economic growth also means that manufacturing in China has become more expensive as labor begins to cost more, capital begins to cost more, and land begins to cost more. They explain that this is exactly what happened in the United States after the Industrial Revolution. After we industrialized and our economy grew, corporations and companies began leaving to manufacture offshores because there was cheaper labor there. And that is exactly what China is doing in Latin America today. As explained by CNBC on March 2nd of 2019, China is investing most of their money in Latin America on infrastructure projects, which aims to connect manufacturing centers to broader trade routes. But they also explain that this allows China to take advantage of the cheap labor costs in Latin America, which they continue that by 2020 it is expected that Latin American labor will cost 30% less than Chinese labor, which ultimately means that Chinese corporations and the Chinese government is going to be able to exploit this cost advantage, and their companies and government is going to be able to get its benefit. But next, China is going to focus on natural resource extraction in Latin America. It is no secret that Latin America is rich with natural resources, and uncoincidentally, that is probably why China is there in the first place. As Bloomberg on March 2nd of 2019 asserts, there are only 4 countries which China has invested 95% of their Latin American capital in. Those countries are Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil, and Ecuador. Uncoincidentally, those 4 countries also accounted for 90% of natural resource exportation in the year 2018. These also happen in 3 main categories: coal, oil, and silicon, the essential ingredient for the growing technology market, which is going to give China a massive advantage. However, The Guardian on March 2nd of 2019 warns that this massive investment may spell doom for Latin America, explaining that we have already seen a mountain leveled in Peru, the entire Amazon rainforest dug up in Ecuador, and 85% of soy fields dug up in Argentina for the oil underneath it, which has increased the cost of food for people living there by 95%, which means that the long-run consequence of Chinese investment in this region may mean that it is harder for people that are already there to continue living there. But finally, China will make Latin America dependent on foreign investment. Foreign investment, like all things that are fun, isn't all bad in moderation. However, Latin America is taking way too much of it right now. As the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean on March 2nd of 2019 explains, in the year 2000, Latin America received 10% of global foreign investment. However, in the year 2018, they received 47% of global foreign investment. This is because other governments and other investors are following China's lead and putting their capital in Latin America. However, the New York Times warns on March 4th of 2019 that this means that foreign investors are going to be the ones benefiting from the capital gains taken out of Latin America. They further estimate that approximately $9 billion worth of tax revenue has already left Latin America as a result of this direct foreign investment. But they further continue that this gets much worse, as they explain, because nearly $900 billion worth of revenue could leave Latin America and go to foreign investors in countries like China by the year 2024, which ultimately means that these countries and companies are going to be benefiting off of the work and development of Latin America rather than Latin America itself. So, returning to today's question, how will China's influence impact Latin America? It is clear that China is going to reshape the Latin American economy and create long-term economic dependencies. We saw this first to be true because Latin America would become a new manufacturing center for China. Second, because China will extract natural resources from Latin America. And finally, because China will make Latin America dependent on foreign investment. So while Xi is depending on platitudes about his wasteware in order to pass the One Belt, One Road policy right now, what we are going to see in the long run are much more dire consequences for people actually in Latin America, and an enormous shift of the region's economy and a new global economy that we cannot yet predict what will do.